Thank you, Kirsten. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us after lunch. As you know, we are pretty high energy over here, so we're very excited to kick off this technical assistance. And I'd like to introduce you to Celia Garcia, the Acting Director of the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. And she'd like to say a few words to kick this off for us.
Perfect. Thank you, Patrick. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, as you said, it's after lunch, so we've got to have a lot of energy, and I'm very excited to be here today. Very excited about this webinar. I mean, I think it's really important. There's so much important work that we do at DCO to help just in general access economic opportunity. But I think after the last year that we've had, we're really trying to help people go from that emergency response to economic opportunity and economic recovery as we go forward. And to me, workforce and apprenticeships are such a huge part of that, right? Creating career paths, creating opportunities, and really helping folks to develop their career is really critical in the work that we do. And so really excited that we're having this conference, being able to provide a little bit more insight in what we're looking for and giving everybody an opportunity to discuss. And so excited to see so many folks here, really excited for the opportunity and just really appreciate the work that everybody here does. So that's quick, short, but really excited to be here. And we'll turn it back to Patrick and let you guys jump into the details.
Thank you so much, Director. Okay. Again, welcome to the Apprenticeship Illinois 2021 Notice of Funding Opportunity Bidders Information Session. Before the session begins, please mute your microphone. This presentation will be recorded and available on the official Apprenticeship Illinois Notice of Funding Opportunity link as a future reference. Questions should be entered into the chat section. All questions must be in writing, and responses will be added under the FAQ section of the Apprenticeship Illinois 2021 Notice of Funding Opportunity website. The informational webinar walks through the purpose of the Notice of Funding Opportunity and the grant submission requirements. It is for informational purposes only, and the Notice of Funding Opportunity is the guideline of record and should be referenced for all any and all questions. We will reference the Notice of Funding Opportunity page numbers where we can as we go through the slides today. The first half till 2:30 p.m. of this webinar will focus on the grant purposes, and the second half of the webinar will focus on the technical, pre-award, and submission requirements. Next slide. And next slide. Okay, my name is Patrick Campbell. I am the Program Development Division Manager for the Office of Employment and Training, Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Kim, would you like to introduce yourself?
She says she's not able to unmute.
There
Okay.
we go. Thank you. Sorry, everyone. Technical difficulties. Hello, Kim Kuchenbrod. I'm an Illinois State University consultant and TPM fellow, working with DCO and work-based learning administrator and the talent pipeline.
Candace?
Hi, Candace Dickerson. I'm with NIU as a consultant to DCEO and also the Apprenticeship Illinois project manager.
Okay, and I think Mark and I don't know whether Natasha is on. Yes, she is. Natasha?
Hello, I'm Natasha Telger, Associate Director with SIU Center for Workforce Development, part of the Illinois WorkNet team.
And Mark
Thanks,
Burgess.
Patrick. It's Mark Burgess.
Oh, you're
I am on with the Office of Employment and Training. Performance Manager will be speaking to you on the performance expectations of the grant.
Great, thank you all. Again, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the Illinois WorkNet website. All technical assistance sessions and tools will be listed on the website also. All FAQs must be asked and will be answered on this site. Responses will be updated daily. Due to procurement regulations, calling us with individual questions cannot be addressed individually. We must answer all questions in a public forum or on an FAQ page. Candace Dickerson is the Apprenticeship Illinois Project Manager, and she will receive and compile all responses daily and reference the site frequency for updates. Do not assume you are guaranteed a renewal just because you are currently a grantee. So please listen carefully to all of the narrative regarding this notice of funding opportunity. Next slide. Next slide. Very good. Okay, so it's very important to remember that this notice of funding, the application that we wrote to the Department of Labor requesting funds for the apprenticeship expansion grant, all information in that application was in line with the governor's executive order number 3. And our goal is to unite the workforce development partners around regional cluster strategies, identify high impact regional clusters and associated in demand occupations, implement a coordinated workforce development strategy around regional clusters, prepare Illinois workers for a career, not just their next job, increase apprenticeship opportunities, address barriers to successful training and employment, establish and support equity goals and that align with the Perkins equity goals, connect job seekers with employers, shorten time from credential to employment, and integrate workforce services across program providers for one-stop customers. Kim?
How does INFO align with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation Talent Pipeline Strategies? The apprenticeship expansion, excuse me, I lost connectivity. I'm losing connectivity still.
Kim, we can hear you.
We can still hear you, Kim.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. I had an unstable connection come up. Okay, so the GNOFO connects to the talent pipeline strategy put in place by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. All navigators will be working with setting up strategic partnerships to address the workforce needs within their EDR regions. More information on the TPM system will be discussed later on in the slide presentation. Next slide. The Talent Pipeline Expansion Program consists of 2 key partners, the intermediaries and the Navigator system. The navigators are responsible for reaching out and connecting to the business side of the expansion program, and the intermediaries are going to be working with the individuals to establish the apprenticeship training programs. Collectively, these make up the Talent Pipeline program as well as Apprenticeship Illinois Expansion Program. Next slide.
All right, so there are 5 core components of the registered apprenticeship. They are related instruction, on-the-job training, rewards for skill gains, national credential, and business involvement. So a brief summary of all of them would be, for the related technical instruction or the RTI components, the on-the-job learning, I'm sorry. So RTI, just so you know, is classroom-based learning that helps provide technical knowledge. The education partners collaborate with businesses to develop the curriculum based on the skills and knowledge needed by apprentices. All partners are going to work together to identify how to pay for the related instruction, including the cost to the employer and other funds that can be leveraged. Apprentices will also receive structured on-the-job training or hands-on experience. So this is actually where the apprentices perform duties at the employer job site. He is trained by an experienced mentor or trainer on site, and the on-the-job training is developed by mapping the skills and knowledge that the apprentice must learn over the course of the program in order to be fully proficient at the job. The apprentices are going to receive rewards for skill gains, otherwise known as progressive increases in wages, as their skills increase, which helps reward and motivate the apprentices as they advance through the training. Every apprenticeship or registered apprenticeship program is going to result in a nationally recognized credential being like a portable, stackable certificate of completion from an approved registered apprenticeship program. And apprentices must master every skill and have all the knowledge needed to be fully proficient for a specific occupation. I did want to mention that the IRAPs, or the industry recognized apprenticeship program, have been revoked under the Biden administration and will no longer be considered for this NOFO. Lastly, and most importantly, apprenticeships must have business involvement. Like, it's an absolute must that obtaining employers is usually the biggest challenge for the grantees. But they are important because they are the foundation of every apprenticeship program, and the skills needed by their workforce are at the core of the apprenticeship programs. Businesses must play an active role in building a program and be involved in every step in designing the apprenticeship. Next slide. All right, so we talked about the 5 core components of registered apprenticeships. Now I'm just going to address the 3 approaches to the training delivery. The slide is very cumbersome, could be a little confusing. So today I'm just going to give an overview, but I will go into more detail during the TA session for intermediaries if needed. As a former intermediary grantee myself, I know we generally follow the traditional front load model, just to give you an idea. So there are 3 approaches to how one can complete the apprenticeship program. They can be time-based, competency-based, or a hybrid. Competency-based approach is going to involve only a successful demonstration of the skills. There's no set time limit or like amount of hours. A traditional time-based approach is going to involve completion of at least 2,000 hours, depending on the industry, of the on-the-job learning. And then the hybrid approach requires the apprentice to complete both a minimum number of on-the-job training and RTI hours. And apprentices must also demonstrate their knowledge of skills. The next part of the slide is going to show how the classes can be delivered. It's flexible, just to be able to help you guys meet the needs of the employer. So as mentioned before, apprenticeship training is a combination of on-the-job training, work experience, and technical training. And there are 3 approaches to delivering that training. The first is a traditional approach, where the apprentice receives both the related instruction and the on-the-job training concurrently throughout the program. The second is when you front load, the training, where the apprentices complete some of the related instruction before starting the job in order to learn the critical skills required for the first day on the job site. And then the last approach will be the segmented, where apprentices alternate between related instruction and the on-the-job training. And next slide.
Apprenticeships support both businesses and individual needs. For businesses, using TPM strategies and developing employer-led collaboratives can identify like competencies for high-demand, hard-to-fill positions, leading to apprenticeship opportunities as one of several career pathways to a career field. For the individual, using pre-apprenticeship training programs, programs of study, career and tech ed, and other training possibilities can help an individual establish a career pathway leading to an adult apprenticeship training program into a specific career field. Collectively, between the businesses and the individuals, both of them will have a return on their investment by using the apprenticeship training programs. Next slide. Apprenticeship Illinois expansion consists of several different components. The Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity is the administrator of the Apprenticeship Illinois expansion, while the Illinois Workforce and Innovation Board, their committees, their workforce, and their task force oversee the policies and procedures for developing this program. Two key components of the Apprenticeship Illinois is the regional navigators and the apprenticeship intermediaries. The regional navigators represented in all regions in Illinois are the recruitment business side, whereas the intermediaries work with the partners in coordinating, designing, and managing all of the apprenticeship training programs. Beneficiaries within each community is the businesses interested in expanding the programs, potential apprentices, and any supporting stakeholders within an EDR region. Next slide. The department recognizes that apprenticeships are a promising work-based learning strategy connecting individuals to a career pathway, as well as being a solution for business to find and tap into undiscovered talent. The department and the IWIB Apprenticeship Committee have determined support for apprenticeship intermediaries and regional navigators are the best investment to build the foundation for apprenticeship expansion in Illinois. Regional apprenticeship navigators and intermediaries represent two important sides of the statewide apprenticeship system. The navigators are representing and host apprenticeship, where the intermediaries represent and supply the instructions and partnerships. The state received its third apprenticeship expansion grant from the USDL this June. Its express purpose is to increase the number of registered apprenticeships by 750 by June 2025. Other goals include increasing the number of apprentices from historically underrepresented populations and growing apprenticeships as a career pathway strategy in more places in Illinois. Next slide. For the 2021 NOFO, there are three grant program approaches. The 2021 NOFO has a new approach, and these approaches were defined on feedback from Apprenticeship Committee and current grantees. The goal is to establish regional navigators in all 10 EDR regions, expand established and new apprenticeship intermediaries through the state, and to represent DEI inclusion of underrepresented populations. As stated earlier, current grantees should not assume they are guaranteed refunding for existing programs. Under the technical section of the Apprenticeship 2021 NOFO, there are specific sessions addressing targeted populations and how they can fit into the Apprenticeship Illinois framework. All sessions will be recorded for future reference and can be found on the NOFO website page. Program Approach Run is funded an apprenticeship navigator within each of the 10 economic development regions. 10 to 12 grants will be awarded with a funding range of $75,000 to $125,000. The total amount for the Navigator approach to this NOFO is $750,000 to $1.5 million. This grant round seeks to cultivate apprenticeship development that leads to increased registered apprenticeships enrollment in areas of the state where apprenticeship programs do not exist or are underdeveloped. Promote new strategies for communicating the value of a workforce diversity to employers and proactively creating equity strategies that lead to historically underrepresented individuals. To increase the number of individuals entering and succeeding in a registered apprenticeship program. I'd like to note that there is that consideration may be given to supporting more than one apprenticeship navigator in the greater Chicago metropolitan area, which is Region 4. As you go through this NOFO, please reference the map that's included in the appendices on which EDR you are located in, as well as the LWIAs within that region. Next slide.
Hey, Kim, let me
Yes.
just add in there. We will also be looking at particularly area, a couple of regions that currently do not have navigators. And so we'll be taking a look at those in particular and giving, particular consideration to applicants within those regions, which would be
Thank you.
Central Illinois and Southwest Illinois.
Thank you. So what is a regional navigator? A navigator serves as a key point of contact. So they are an apprenticeship consultant for businesses, the education providers, local workforce areas, chambers, and other apprenticeship partners. They serve as a convener coordinating sector partnerships between interested parties and connecting the various components with supportive services to reduce the barriers for workers, collect and track talent development needs, apprentice data if there isn't an intermediary within the region. Navigators are responsible for facilitating development of apprenticeships with businesses and industries. This can include consulting with the employers and conducting worksite visits to assess the viability of apprenticeships. They can identify informational and financial resources, including apprenticeship tax credits, to support the businesses. Navigators will also serve as the acting convener for regional coordination and system networking. This entails developing an extensive network of stakeholders at all levels of the public and private sector within a region to identify opportunities for program expansion and promotion, short and long-term demand planning, reviewing competencies and credentials for specific hard-to-fill positions, while developing a talent value stream using all of the partners within your EDR region. And then also working with the employers to realize the return on the investment by working collectively within those sector partnerships. Navigators will also provide administrative and technical support to intermediaries when needed. They will also participate in the state of Illinois sponsored work groups and training programs, and all navigators will be required to go through the Talent Pipeline Management Training Program. Next slide. So continuing off of the previous slide, the navigators are responsible for promoting and creating a network that includes, but is not limited to, the following organizations, which would include industry associations, chambers of commerce, CBOs, local workforce areas, community college, technical schools, and school districts. Collectively, all partners will develop a sector partnership to engage in a granular overview of common pain points in developing a talent pipeline using the real-time data, and to develop apprenticeship opportunities that can lead to a nationally recognized credential and expand Illinois' workforce. They will validate and demonstrate a deliverable to the business partners by articulating how they will be collecting the data through the TPM process outreach. This must be outlined in your application. Next slide.
Kim, let me just also add to this slide that in the past, it's been difficult because this was a new strategy. And in some cases, it was an add-on, or the strategy was not articulated clearly in terms of what those deliverables would be by grant applicants. As opposed to what we're looking for now, we will be looking for not an afterthought, or business development folks are out there already, and that these folks are kind of riding the tail of those folks. We want to see a strategy that is developed, and how you are particularly identifying your collaboratives that you're going to be developing, and how you will validate the data that you collect on that meaningful business connection and business connections that result in an apprenticeship being cultivated and developed with particular businesses within your region. So there is going to be a real focus on this for this particular round.
Thank you, Patrick. And if I could also interject that to give you an example, we are working with a local EDC, and they are working in partnership with their Chamber of Commerce's, the Alliance Workforce Partners, as well as a particular sector group, and they are trying to address a need in advanced manufacturing. So in order to do this, what they have done is they have put out a plan in order to meet this need, and which includes looking at their current demand within their region with it and the training providers that are there. So can they adjust their curriculum in order to meet these needs? So moving on, in previous grants, Navigators have developed successful partnerships and apprenticeship programs in healthcare, supply chain, construction, manufacturing, information technology, and hospitality. But apprenticeship training programs and sector partnerships should not be limited to those. They should also consider non-traditional pathways such as culinary arts, meat processing, equine management, bakeries. These are just a few that are being looked at currently. DEI, as it applies to employers, minority-owned businesses, and targeted underrepresented employer groups. So you need to ask yourself, what is your strategy for this outreach? No cold calling is considered an outreach activity. How are you actually going to engage with the businesses to move forward to develop your sector partnerships? You must match your regional, local, and state outreach initiatives that were outlined in your within those plans. Next slide.
I think that's the, yeah. All right, so we just spoke about the program approach number 1, which was for the navigators. So approach number 2 is developing new and expanding established apprenticeship programs through intermediaries. So the number of grants that will be issued this time around is 16 to 20. The funding range is $150,000 to $350,000. And the total grant amount awarded will be $1 to $4 million. So an intermediary, a new intermediary, is one that can quickly get an emerging apprenticeship program into operation, and they're like able to immediately recruit and register apprentices. An existing intermediary has programs that are already in place, and the organization is able to easily supplement those programs. So an example would be an existing program who wants to diversify their program with DEI to include women, minorities, and persons with disabilities, for example. This grant is looking to fund projects that are proactively supporting equity by creating recruiting, outreach, and support strategies that will result in an increase in the number of diverse populations enrolling in and successfully completing apprenticeship. You'll notice throughout the whole presentation and throughout the NOFO, DEI is an important component. Those who focus on the targeted populations are given priority in the merit review process, and all of those target populations are listed out in the NOFO, so please make sure to review those. Last thing, along with the diversity of the population of the participants, we are looking for you to also consider the population of business owners that are in this group. And when recruiting, consider the partners that service these individuals. We're really looking for some ideas to start thinking outside of the box. Next slide. So what does an intermediary do? The main goal of intermediaries is to ease the burden for businesses, particularly small business small companies that don't have the personnel to execute such tasks. By performing administrative responsibilities such as registering the businesses and apprentices, perform the tracking activities and reporting the results. The intermediaries must be the key point of contact and support for any business in the region. The intermediaries must also coordinate with a regional navigator to facilitate the registration of new programs with the United States Department of Labor Office of Apprenticeship or the expansion of the existing programs. Intermediaries must also understand business development and workforce development. And again, intermediaries help the employer determine their needs and coordinate apprenticeship programs to help them hire and mentor apprentices. Next slide. Okay, so most of this has been spoken to on a previous slide, so I won't read it all. Just again, the major goal for intermediaries is to recruit apprentices and prepare them for apprenticeships. So intermediaries must demonstrate their knowledge of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion within apprenticeship occupations and industries. It's important for the intermediaries to develop strong partnerships. So example, partnering with a training provider that's already conducting RTI. And an example of partnering would be to utilize the resources from those other organizations, like the sharing of curricula, standards, and best practices. Basically, having strong partnerships can definitely help build your program. Next slide. Okay, so again, this is just distinguishing features between a new and an existing intermediary. The new intermediary is one that can quickly get emerging apprenticeships into operation and able to immediately recruit and register apprentices. An existing intermediary, not necessarily one that was funded through one of our grants, has programs that are already in place, and the organization is able to easily supplement those programs. So an example would be an existing program that wants to diversify their program to include women or minorities, re-entered citizens, things of that nature. Either way, you must state in your application exactly how you're going to help the state hit its goal of 750 apprentices. If you are a current intermediary, as explained before, you must be able to articulate how your program will increase the number of registered apprentices and how you can expand into other sectors. And the current grantees, again, must be able to describe how they met their current grant obligations. Next slide. Okay, so these are the apprenticeship intermediary deliverables and outcomes. I won't go through them all for time's sake today, but please make sure to refer to page 10 of the NOFO and Appendix K. So read the NOFO, but I just want to focus on a couple things. Number one, the number of apprentices. You must hit your deliverable. Number two is the employer outreach is not just contacting an employer. And Kim mentioned that before too, with the Navigator role as well. They need to be engaged. So an engaged employer can be something along employer adopted apprenticeship program and they're ready to host an apprenticeship. And a contacted employer is just you went outreach, you discussed it with the opportunities and the decision makers. Again, make sure to refer to page 10 on the NOFO and Appendix K for a full list of the deliverables for intermediaries.
And Candace, this has been updated since the previous NOFO. So this is an important page for people to pay attention to. These definitions of engaged employers and contacted employers, especially, you know, for navigators as much as anyone.
Thank you, sir. Next slide. Oh, you're on the slide. I'm sorry.
Yep, I think it skipped over a slide with the animation, maybe.
Oh, yeah. Go back on that one.
All right. It's not wanting to stay right on there, is it? All right. Well, all right. All right. Okay. Why does it stay there? All right. Well, okay. So on the previous slide, I'll just go through it real quick. You can refer back to it if we're having trouble with keeping it on that page. But what you'll have is and within Illinois WorkNet, we have the iWIS tools, and those are developed for individuals, navigators, and intermediaries. And so we have a set of tools that for those that are doing like the case manage folks, where you'll have your intake form, eligibility enrollment, you have communication tools, so you can document those different case management and communication tools where you can document those services, as well as case notes, as well as keeping all that information into one space and communicating with the individuals that are participating. We also have some tools for the navigators, and the navigator tools have business intelligence tools using EBS. We have communication and follow-up tools, as well as tools to document those outreach events and that business engagement. We'll also have a place for you to have your work plan and reports. We'll have dashboards. We also have the iPad's performance and reporting scorecards, as well as a Connect to Navigator tool. So you'll be able to find intermediaries, navigators, American Job Centers, so that it's completely transparent and open, and a tool that will help you make those connections with the other grantees. And then that information will be used to compile the necessary reports and to be able to share that information. So that is on, I think it's slide 22 or right around there for your, slide 22 for reference after this webinar. And then Mark, are you covering the next slide?
Okay. And Natasha touched on a little bit of performance on that last slide, where the iWIS system will be able to track the performance outcomes and reporting for all the individuals. All grantees will be expected to comply with certain reporting and performance requirements. As you see here, there are quarterly reports that are required to be submitted. You can see the reporting periods are there in front of you with end dates of March, June, September, and December. So within 30 days of the end of those quarters, it will be expected that the grantees report on all of their customers. They will also be expected to meet certain local negotiated performance measures, and those I think are available in one of the attachments or appendices to this. As you'll notice on the right, and we'll go into these a little bit more in the next slide, there are 5 performance measures. 3 of them are based on exit outcomes and earnings, and 2 of those are based on training. So we'll go into the exit-based outcomes on the next slide, and you'll see there are 2 employment rate outcomes that are based on second quarter after exit, and 1 based on fourth quarter exit after exit. If you please go to the next slide. We've got a little bit more detail to each of these measures. Here we go, thanks. So again, employment rate second quarter after exit and fourth quarter exit after exit are the same measure, except recorded at a different period of time following a participant's exit from the program. You'll also note on these two measures, there's a little bit of difference if your individuals, your apprentices also are eligible as a Title I youth. They also can get positive outcomes if they are going on to further education or training. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an employment outcome that gets a positive towards that measure, but they can be progressing along some kind of a career pathway towards additional education or training. And then the third measure here is median earnings, again measured second quarter after exit from the program. Just to point out that there's a lot more detail to these performance measures. And if you're awarded one of our grants, we can provide you more information on how these are calculated, who goes into the measure. But we just wanted to give you kind of a quick definition of each of these measures. And then finally, the last two measures on the next slide are, and I'll apologize that this slide also says exit outcomes. If you go to the next slide, please. This slide should say primary indicators of performance training outcomes, not outcomes. So if you want to correct that on your paper copy, if you printed these off already, we're going to update this slide for future sessions, as well as the version that makes it onto the website that Patrick mentioned earlier. This should actually say training outcomes. So the final two measures are based on training. So either credential attainment, which is measured fourth quarter after exit, and then finally, the last measurable goal is the measurable skill gains, which is a percentage of the program participants who receive some kind of a measurable skill, and those are recorded on a program year basis. So that's one measurement that someone can get multiple actual outcomes to their performance if they are in a program that overlaps multiple program years. Again, we can provide you quite a bit more detail on these. If you're awarded a grant, the measurable skill gain is really, and actually the credential attainment rate, have a lot of intricacies to them that are too kind of detailed to elaborate in a session like this. But they are all calculated as far as from the training that the participants, apprentices, would be going through. So again, we'll talk with all of those grantees that are awarded grants later with more detail on how to record these and exactly what goes into each of those measures. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Candace.
Sorry about that. Okay, so basically I'm highlighting the talent pipeline management participation, the target populations, the target industries, occupation and growth, incumbent workers, new employees, pre-apprenticeship, youth apprenticeships, DEI, and how you can leverage funding from other programs and other partners. So a quick highlight would definitely be to focus on the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also the list of the target populations that are going to be, actually listed in the NOFO.
So
Patrick, yeah.
Candace, let me highlight a couple of points that we'd like to see. If you're a local workforce area or another source that can identify leverage funds that shows opportunity for sustainability, we want you to articulate that. So if you're going to leverage WIOA funding, tell us about it. Talk about how you intend to do that. For some of you out there that I see in the chat that maybe have an H-1B grant, show how you'll leverage funding for that. Talk about that as a resource. If you're partnering with sister state agencies and their programs, talk about what kind of funding you'll receive or resources that you'll receive. Doesn't just have to be funding. It could be resources that you're utilizing also to show sustainability. Also, we're going to want you to specifically identify that you've looked at your regional plan and the state of Illinois, the state plan on the targeted populations, sectors, industries, etc. And you're identifying some real data that is used to back up your intentions or strategies for your application. Don't assume we know anything. Those of you that are new funders, we may have worked with you in the past, but the actual grantee reviewers may not be aware of the work that DCO has done in the past. So please don't assume that we know anything. You're going to need to articulate that in your application. Those applicants that are already grantees, it is going to be critical for you to identify and validate data that you achieved your deliverables or that you are on target to achieve your deliverables under your current grant. So it's really going to be important that you identify that information. So go ahead, Kim and Candace. Sorry to interject.
That's all I have for that one. If you wanted to go to the next slide. And then Kim.
Navigators must be required to participate in all TPM trainings that will take place. There will be an intro to TPM, and there is a TPM Illinois Academy in production. They must encourage expansion within industries and align with their regional work plans that are out there. The navigators must use the state performance management system for participating outcomes, and they do need to count their part towards 750 new apprenticeships within Illinois by 2024. Next slide.
Okay, so again, I told you earlier, we were going to speak about the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion for the apprenticeships for this grant. There are target populations, that this grant wants to serve. The Apprenticeship Illinois Committee, the governor, the U.S. Department of Labor, DCEO are all putting an emphasis on DEI. Again, the list of target populations is on page 15 of the NOFO. DEI is a priority of the 750 apprentices that we're looking to serve. Projects funded under the NOFO are going to have to include strategies to address equity, including changes in the recruitment practices. We're looking for the grantees to really think outside the box on where they're going to get recruiting from. They need you to have intentional and inclusive marketing. So including using images of women, people of color, addressing discrimination within programs at workplaces, and offering support that boosts retention and completion. So we know a lot of the participants may need additional support such as childcare, transportation, career counseling. So make sure that you're able to speak to that as well. Both the navigator and the intermediary applicants are required to address diversity, equity, and inclusion in the proposal application and articulate why and how this can be cost efficient and an effective solution for both the employer and the community. Specifically, the proposal reviewers are going to be looking for evidence that the applicants include DEI action plans for both the navigators and the intermediaries that's outlined in Appendix E.
So Candace, when we talk about the navigator portion of this regarding DEI, we're looking for minority owned, underrepresented
Correct.
companies that you may be working with in these targeted populations that we've identified in the notice of funding opportunity, and that we've addressed which led to our deliverable because we addressed this in our application to the Department of Labor.
And next slide.
The next 3 slides that you're going to view are the 3 tables that are in the NOFO that targets the current industries, occupations, and the growth that we are looking at. Table 1 identifies the top growth industries in Illinois, and this information was this information source is IDES and EMSI analysis. So the targeted growths are transportation, warehousing, finance and insurance, healthcare, social assistance, professional, scientific, and tech services, as well as construction. Next slide, please. We are also looking at industries that were impacted by COVID-19. And again, using the resources of IDES and EMSI, the targeted industries that had the most significant impact because of the COVID-19 pandemic were accommodations and food services, waste management and remediation, retail, trade, manufacturing, healthcare, social assistance, arts, entertainment, and recreation. The third slide talks about emerging registered apprenticeship opportunities. And in some of these, you can see the industries on one side of it, but the occupation, many of the occupations can be multiple within that giving industry. Using arts and entertainment, for example, what we are referring to are the film editors, the graphic designers, the individuals who are working behind the scenes in regards to the arts, entertainment, and filming industry. This is an industry that was highly impacted by COVID and is in a recovery mode. In the construction industry, there are multiple positions within the construction industry, from plumbers to sheet metal to woodworking and so forth. We are looking at many of those within that. Now, the cross-sector positions that we are looking at are human services or janitorial services, which cross multiple sectors that are under consideration. And as you go on down the page, you can see where we're looking at, whether it's a multiple career pathways that we are looking at, or if it's in recovery, or if it is expansion or growth mode. And this is also determined by IDES information. Next slide, please. The elements of a competitive proposal means coordination with your regional and local workforce plans, importance of partnerships and coordination and having the MOUs in place for those partnerships. The resource materials online and in the appendix are there for you to use. The Navigator must-haves and the intermediary must-haves. And we will talk about those in just a second. Next slide, please.
Kim, let me add in there something. When we talk about the coordination with the regional and local plans, we are looking for, we're not necessarily looking for definitive boundaries. We want cooperation across lines. Certainly, if you're a local workforce area and you're applying within the region to be a navigator or even an intermediary, we are looking for a coordination and partnerships with other local workforce areas and agreements regarding that. So it's really important to show those partnerships and the coordination through MOUs, or other resources identified in your application. Next slide.
Patrick,
Yes.
this is your slide.
Okay, sorry. So obviously we have everything laid out there for you. The must-haves, for your projects. I know that memorandum of understanding is always a challenge for those that understand it. We have examples of memorandum of understanding. We also have a lot of examples of where all we received was a letter of commitment, and it didn't work out so well for that grantee. The reason being, there was not a strong partnership or a strong, well thought through commitment by all the partners of what the deliverables will be. So at the end, because there was only a letter of commitment, the grantees, had trouble getting a particular deliverable from one of their partners, because the partner understood that that deliverable or assumed that that deliverable would be provided through some other source or resource. So it is really important to be clear and really identify what those partners, what the roles and deliverables will be by all those partners. Another important one is the resume of the program staff. We've seen after several of these applications being received and grant awards being given, that there was major difficulty securing the staff. It took 6 months to a year. We are asking for more of a clear strategy and certainly a definitive timeline. If your timeline is that 6 months or a year after you're awarded the dollars, that's when you'll get your hire for the project lead, for your intermediary or your navigator. That's not going to work. We want to see that staff are being put on and ramped up relatively quickly in these grants, and that will need to be very, very clear, because again, that's been difficult for some grantees in the past. The outcome summary, we need to see what those deliverables will be. Please, those that are previously navigators, please go through this notice of funding opportunity and really take a look at what the deliverables and the data validation will be that will be required under this grant. And you will need to discuss how you intend to do that. If you were a previous grantee, you're also going to want to discuss your data validation for the deliverables and what you achieved under your previous grant. That will be very important. Next slide, please.
I think we've mentioned this in several different slides. And so what I really want to point out on this particular one is, if you are not familiar where your regional or local plans are located, please reference the link in the second paragraph, and you will be able to go to the MOU dashboard and retrieve those plans for your review and any material that you want to put into your proposal. Next slide, please. As we've mentioned many times, there is an importance of developing partnerships with the navigators, the intermediaries, and the business community. And sector partnerships can take on many different, can look in many different ways. One, it could be a business and within a particular industry, let's say a manufacturing industry, and then it's a community college and the navigator serving as a convener. Another partnership may include adding in your vocational technical, or as well as entering all of your education partners within your given region who can make a difference in your curriculum and developing your apprenticeship training programs. And of course, the key layer of it is going to be the businesses who are going to the process is based off of the manufacturer cluster, for example, being the end customer of the result, and the navigator leading the team through the strategies to identify what their common pain points are. The second tier of it would be bringing in your education partners to look at the curriculum and training that's available, and do they have the capacity to expand that training, or are they willing to adapt their curriculum in order to meet the needs of the employer employers. And as you're building your value stream within your community, you want to include anybody who's involved in the workforce development within a particular region or a particular community that can have an impact in your apprenticeship training programs. So those other partners could include business associations, public-private partners, your local workforce agencies, your unions within your communities, and reaching down clear into your high school districts. It can also include any other needed partner that is going to play a role in developing your apprenticeship pipeline. Next slide, please.
So for your MOU musts, the recruitment will be both for navigators and these are MOUs for navigators and intermediaries. Recruitment will be both the business and the participants, because you need to have both in order to have an apprenticeship program. So that one needs to be very clear. And in some cases, your partners may be businesses. It may be difficult to get an MOU from a business. So in those cases, we would be willing to take a look at letters of commitment. But this recruitment is a very important part of this in terms of the MOUs. Who will be doing that? What does that look like? Eligibility, IWDS, enrollment, case management, performance requirements, reporting, follow-up, and there may be a slurry of other types of identified deliverables by your partner. And you could have multiple partners producing these deliverables, and MOUs will need to be complete and very clear for all of those. Next slide.
We've talked a lot about the must-haves that you need for your proposal, but the key ones that we want, or the ones that you do need to include, is identifying your region needs and the opportunities. How will you serve as the point of contact for your community and developing your sector partnerships? How are you going to do your business outreach and development plans, including capacity building, also, most importantly, including the equity within your apprenticeship strategies? As many times through this presentation, one of the key focus area is DEI, and that is something that's going to be looked at very carefully in a Navigator proposal. We also want to see evidence of existing capacity or past experiences, as well as evidence that will help you be able to increase the number of apprenticeships within the region. Next slide.
Okay, so for the intermediary proposals, we covered it, but let's do it again. Clearly, you have to have a solid program design and implementation plan. For the new intermediaries, you want to know how will this intermediary develop programs where they don't exist. So that's what we were talking about, different expansions or just new altogether. For leveraged resources, how will these resources help build and expand programming, especially for the underserved population? And there must be a solid outreach plan, essentially like your marketing, how you're marketing to reach these DEI apprentices and also the businesses, making sure to include equity in those strategies. And then lastly, show evidence that they, as intermediaries, will be able to increase the number of apprentices in the region by the close of the grant. Next slide.
All resources for the NOFO can be located on the link posted on the slide. Any additional updates will also be added to the site when available. You will also be able to see any of the webinars that will be posted on particular populations. So please tag this and go to it, check it numerous times, because all updates will be added to this link. Next slide.
Kim, let me add in there that the FAQ will also be on here. I would highly encourage you to frequently review the FAQ, so we're not repeating questions, because if it's a repeat of a question, we're simply going to refer to the FAQ page that it's been responded to already.
Thank you. Beginning today, there will be a series of informational webinars, which includes budget and reporting requirements and targeted population webinars. As we just mentioned, all webinars will be recorded and can be reviewed at your own convenience. Some of the targeted population webinars will focus on the aging workforce, re-entry individuals, youth, disabled, military personnel, DEI, targeted industries, arts, entertainment, recreation, and accommodation industries, TPM strategies, Navigator tools, and intermediary best practices. Again, you can go to the website for all the webinar details and to register for these links. The webinars begin today and will continue through, I believe, July 22nd. Next slide. The application deadline is stated as above. The grant information workshops begin today. The application deadline is September 15th. There has been a modified application posted on the website, and the deadline has been extended. So please take special note that the deadline has been extended to September 15th. Grant negotiations will begin in October and can continue through December, with a plan to announce the awardees by January 2022.
Yeah, Kim, I want to say one more thing, that 5 p.m. is Central Time. So we may have applicants outside of the state partnering, and so we want to make sure that's clear.
Correct. Applications must be received via email no later than September 15th, as we just mentioned. You want to go ahead, Candace?
Yeah, I got it. I was waiting for the screen. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
So yes, they have to be received via email no later than 5 p.m. Central Time on September 15th, 2021. The email address provided is grantapplication@illinoisworknet.com. Make sure that your grant application does include the uniform application form, the executive summary, the technical proposal, the resumes of the program staff, the partnership agreements and or including your MOUs, and the budget proposal. Applications must be formatted on an 8.5 by 11-inch paper using 11-point type and 100% magnification. Tables may be used to present information with a 10-point type, and the technical proposal is limited to 20 pages. I did want to just add, there was some back and forth, and that's our apologies with the date that the grant ends. Patrick, if you could confirm, I have June 2024. Or Kim?
Yeah, we'll
Yes.
put that on the FAQ.
Okay, got it.
So I do also want to say that this grant application, where you're going to submit your application, I know how this works. I've been around for decades. Please don't wait until the last minute. If it is, because this site will log in when it was uploaded. And if it's 501, we cannot accept it. So it will be rejected based on the time right off the bat. So again, I know people go right up until the minute. Please don't do that. Get it in as soon as you can, so that it's timely and it will not be rejected on something like a minute time.
Next slide. Okay, so freedom of information and the no-fault questions. Any questions that we have regarding the grant opportunity can be sent to apprenticeship@illinoisworknet.com. I am going to be monitoring that email, and any questions that come up, generally you can go to the FAQ section, and then we can get a response back out to you depending on, what the question was. The program webpage also includes a question and answer document for all of the applicants to review, and that link is below as well. Patrick, did you want to add anything? Okay, next slide.
Applicants must demonstrate that they've met its needs, and below you will see on this slide the weighted score for each of those. So the applicant capacity is 20%. The documentation of need and opportunity will be 30%, and that includes the geographical considerations. The quality of the project is weighted with 40%, and that includes the strategies for addressing equity within the apprenticeships. And 10% will be allocated for the budget narrative, cost effectiveness, and the ROI, as well as the sustainability of the program.
I want to add some clarification to Candace's previous question. Yes, it is. We have our deliverable is 750 new registered apprenticeship programs by the end of 2024. And that is seen under the program description of the second page of the notice of funding opportunity.
All right, thanks for sharing. So everybody can be clear, it is 2024. Anything that showed 25 will be updated for the next presentation. Okay, so can the, I think we're on the support new employee apprenticeships.
Is this the correct slide, Candace?
No, I think it's back one.
Okay, I apologize.
Maybe two. It's okay.
There's some transitions in this slide deck, so no matter how many times I click back, it's going to keep continuing to click forward. So,
Okay,
Okay.
I'll just cover it based on the slide deck, and you will be able to view it in your slide deck. So the actual slide is, can an applicant submit proposals for both a navigator and an intermediary? And the answer to that is yes. You can submit, but they need to be separate proposals. So you'll be submitting a proposal as a navigator, and you'll submit a separate proposal as an intermediary. Okay, can these grants serve incumbent workers? And the answer is yes, they can. We look forward to opportunities to serve incumbent workers, facilitate and show a return on investment for those as the talent pipeline builder with employers in your region. And hopefully that will open up opportunities for new employees to backfill with potentially apprenticeships or some additional rapid response funding, et cetera, through the local workforce areas. So there's lots of opportunity. I know we've gone over this with the local workforce areas many times about how this works in serving incumbent workers as a layoff aversion strategy.
Next slide.
Go ahead, Candace.
Okay, so can these grants support pre-apprenticeship programs? And yes, we have recognized that having a strong pre-apprenticeship infrastructure is needed to ensure success and access for individuals that are not fully prepared for a registered apprenticeship program. This NOFO, let's be clear with this part, it will support pre-apprenticeship programs that lead directly to a registered apprenticeship program before the end of the grant period. So it is important to note that the pre-apprenticeship program will be subject to the WIO participant eligibility, case management, and performance requirements, but it has to end in a credential before the end of the grant period, June 2024. Next slide.
So these are just commonly asked questions. This is what the FAQ page will look like. We've answered several of these in our presentation. Can high school districts apply? As a matter of fact, they applied in the last one and they are doing fantastic. So we would encourage high school districts to apply. Can unions apply? Yes. We're working in partnership with many unions. We encourage everyone to apply. I would say to that end, these questions could be misleading because sometimes they appear that it would be a single entity applying. We would not want to see a single entity applying for a grant. You would need some partners in order to apply. And we want you to discuss who those partners are and who you have agreements with. So that's that. I believe we left this in there because that issue of partnershiping is very, very important for your application. Next slide, please.
So as we
Again,
start, go ahead.
Once again, all questions regarding NOFO must be submitted in writing via email to apprenticeship@illinoisworknet.com. We do not want to show any type of, we want to have a even playing field, so we cannot answer questions that are sent to us directly by email or phone. It's very important that you submit all questions in writing via apprenticeship@illinoisworknet.com. And again, I will be monitoring that email box. Campbell, do you have anything else?
Besides the NOFO page and the resources that will be posted there, along with any of the webinar, here are some apprenticeship tools and resources that you may want to consider as you build your NOFO. You can use the Department of Labor Workforce GPS system, the Department of Labor Apprenticeship Playbook, the high-level apprenticeship partner role infographics, and the U.S. Department of Labor Guide to expand apprenticeships to underrepresented populations. Again, this information is available in this presentation, and we will also add these links to the NOFO page. Next slide. Next slide. This concludes our first webinar, informational webinar on the NOFO 2021. We will now open it up for any comments and questions. At the same time, if we cannot get to your comments and questions, please feel free to add them into the chat box, and we will be extracting that information, getting the responses to those questions, and adding them to the FAQ section of the NOFO 20 page link as soon as possible. Thank you.
So Kirsten, I see a couple of questions that came in. How long must an employee be employed by a company to be considered an incumbent worker? We're going to want to check. We had some potential waivers on that, and so I don't want to give incorrect information. Typically, there is an assigned time period to eligible incumbent workers. But I don't want to give incorrect information. So we will answer that question in the FAQ if that can be added to it. The second part of that question is, will all apprentices served by intermediaries have to be WIOA eligible? No, they don't need to be WIOA eligible to be counted. Unless you are paying for a portion of their training, utilizing WIOA dollars. And in that case, yes, they would. But you can, if you participated as a navigator or even an intermediary, and you're kind of a new intermediary, even though you've had an intermediary or sponsored apprenticeship programs in the past, but we're not a grantee, you can count apprentices that you facilitated in some portion of their entry into an apprenticeship program. So you facilitated working with that employer and somehow touched that apprentice person, then we can consider those. But it is important, if you're paying for training utilizing WIOA dollars, yes, they must be eligible for WIOA. Are these two? These are not WIOA dollars. These are Department of Labor dollars through the apprenticeship program. But we have leveraged WIOA dollars to facilitate expanding the amount of funding we have available for this program. So we have a portion of leveraged WIOA dollars included with our application award from the Department of Labor Office of Apprenticeship for the expansion program. And we can elaborate on some of these questions additionally under the FAQ to make sure we're thorough if I'm not answering these completely as you would like.
Again, we are going to be extracting all of these questions. We will get you the correct answers and we will be adding them to the FAQ page. We want to make sure that we're fair and equitable across the board with everyone. And so if you have any questions, please go to the FAQ or reference the FAQ page first. If you don't see the response to your specific question, please add it to the FAQ and we will respond on a daily basis. Are there any more questions before we wrap up? Seeing none at this time, we want to thank you for participating in this webinar. It was recorded. However, it will also be repeated again tomorrow, and then it will be later on in July. Please refer to the calendar for any of the webinar schedules, and feel free to register at that time.
So Kim, tomorrow's will also be live. That's correct?
That is correct. All of the informational webinars are live.
So if you have some additional questions, participate again tomorrow and we'll get those questions identified in the FAQ as well.
Great, thank you so much,
Kim,
everyone.
Is the GATA and Introduction to Grant Writing 101 the next session today?
That is correct.
Okay. So Kirsten, will that start right as soon as this ends?
So the next session I have at 3:30, so we have about an hour break. And
Okay.
then we'll meet again. It is a separate link, so be sure to register and access that separate link if you need to do so to join us at 3:30, but we have about an hour break. So everyone go maybe get your second coffee for this afternoon and relax a little bit, and then we'll see everyone at 3:30.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.